for our keynote today is our newest colleague, Julian Mann, who joined us recently. He was one of the founders of Skybox. With his team from Stanford, they started Skybox a number of years ago, recently acquired by Google, and I am really looking forward to hearing what he has to say.
Really excited to address the question with you all of, so Google now owns satellites. What next? So as I'm sure you're all familiar with at this point, Skybox was acquired by Google back in August. We're all really, really excited to be a part of Google. We loved the vision we were pursuing, and we're excited now to be in a place where we can pursue that vision even greater, even more aggressively, and using all of the amazing capabilities that have been developed here. So for those of you who don't know, we originally got started at Stanford, my co-founders, Dan, Qingyu, John, and I, back in 2009. And 6 years later, we have 2 satellites on orbit and are building a lot more. And our focus from the beginning was really on transitioning the remote sensing industry from where we'd seen it predominantly focused on mapping to this continual monitoring. And that was where the industry, as it was building bigger and bigger satellites, trying to capture higher and higher resolution imagery. And we saw an opportunity to focus on getting good enough high resolution imagery, a little bit better than a meter, but start getting that on a much more frequent basis. Taking it from the maybe monthly updates you can get today if you're a pretty high tier customer of Digital Globe, to ultimately being able to get daily, maybe even hourly revisit anywhere around the world. And we're doing this by sort of changing the game. So this is Worldview 2, one of the most incredible Earth observation satellites that's been built to date. 46 centimeter imagery, about the size of a school bus. Our satellites are much, much smaller. And yes, this is roughly to scale. The question for you all is, which one of these images was collected by the $700 million satellite? This was the Oso mudslide in Washington earlier this year. And by building much smaller satellites, we can ultimately deploy a lot of them. And it doesn't matter if you have a $700 million satellite, a multi-billion-dollar government satellite, or a Skybox satellite. A single satellite can really only see anywhere on Earth once every 3 days. So by building much smaller satellites, we can get many more of them on orbit. And this illustration begins to show us the type of revisit we'll see around the world. So this is just SkySat-1, what we had after our first launch. This is what we start seeing with 2 satellites up, so we start being able to see anywhere on Earth roughly once every 2 days, higher latitudes. This is when we get Block 1 of the constellation launched in about a year. And things really start getting interesting when we get the second block up about 2 years from now. So as I mentioned, SkySat-1 and 2 both successfully launched in the last year. Really, really exciting for us, obviously, after spending 6 years slaving away over satellites. But ultimately, we weren't really just after getting satellites on orbit and declaring victory. We wanted to start doing cool things with them. So we've been imaging tons of different places around the world, major urban centers, been looking at critical infrastructure. This one always stands out to me because I never really thought I could characterize a liquid natural gas facility as beautiful. But then I saw this one and realized I had to readjust my thinking a little bit. And of course, monitoring areas of environmental importance in tracking global climate change. Beyond just imaging, we, for the first time, provide high-resolution video. And I wanted to share a few of the more interesting collections we've had to date. We just got this in the last couple weeks, and every time I see it, I'm still just honestly astounded.
How long is the video for?
So we can collect video at 30, 60, and 90-second increments. All the ones I'm going to show here are 30 seconds because sitting there for 90 starts getting a little bit long. This is really interesting. This is the Donetsk airport in Ukraine, the one that was just recently destroyed due to the ongoing conflict in the region. And we can actually see some of the planes and structures burning on the field. And finally, one of my favorite videos, just because I like boats. This one is not stabilized, so you'll notice there's a little bit of drift moving around. But to me, it is just really mesmerizing to watch these wakes and think about what happens when it's not just the 2 satellites we have up today, but in a year's time when we have 8, or in 2 years' time when we have 14, what collecting data like this really begins to mean. We're not interested in just collecting pixels. Ultimately, we're really interested in producing information and producing knowledge, as you've heard many of us here talk about, which is why it's so perfect that we're now part of the same, because we've been for a long time conveying the same message. So we're interested in doing things like monitoring all of the major ports around the world and extracting information about the shipping traffic that's going on. We're looking at agriculture regions around the world, like this field in Saudi Arabia, and doing interesting analysis on it, like exactly the kind of analysis you can do in Earth Engine. But we haven't just been looking at commercial applications. From the beginning at Skybox, we've been really interested in using our capability to benefit the world. So earlier this year, there were some really, really awful wildfires in Washington. Our friends at Team Rubicon reached out to us and said they had an ongoing project going there to provide on-the-ground relief. And so they asked us if we could get some updated imagery of the region. So we did, and what we were able to find very easily is the burned structures in the area. Team Rubicon deployed a team of on-the-ground first responders, and it was really interesting for us as we started getting information from them from their field reports that directly corroborated what we were seeing in the imagery. And they used the imagery to help better characterize the damage that was going on, more efficiently deploy their limited relief efforts. And ultimately, this was just a first demonstration of what we can do, but we're very excited to continue the partnership with them and provide ongoing support to those kinds of crisis response activities. We've also been working with the Signal program at the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. I've been doing a really interesting project with them where we're developing the first ever typing guide for structures in internally displaced persons camps around the world. These guides can be used ultimately by geospatial analysts for improving the quality and consistency of their analysis across all of the different camps around the world. It can be used by computer scientists to develop better algorithms for detecting the different types of structures. And ultimately, the information derived can be used by on-the-ground humanitarians who are providing support in those different camps. That's just the beginning of what we're doing on this front. I'm really, really excited to be here today announcing we're calling the Skybox for Good beta program. And this is going to be our program for providing access to Skybox imagery to you guys, to organizations exactly like yourself. Thank you. This beta phase is just our first step at getting this going. So we're keeping it small for now. It's really just limited to those of you who are here with us today, our existing partners. And before I get into the specific details of the beta program, I want to look at a little bit of what we've been doing just over the last month. So we reached out to a few of you in the room in anticipation of our event today and asked if there was anything you could do with imagery. So we reached out to 13 partners. We've tasked over 70 locations. We collected over 122 images, produced 29 cloud-free mosaics, and 18 of them are currently available in Maps Engine and Earth Engine. So we reached out to SkyTruth. They've identified new mountaintop removal mining activity near hiking trails in really popular state parks. Halo Trust, who I'm sure many of you know at this point, been working on mine removal in a small village in Sri Lanka. And both the development as well as agricultural land had been impacted by previous mine locations. So they had an ongoing project to remove mines in the region. And using updated imagery from October, we're able to verify that 84 houses have been built where landmines were previously destroyed, and over 40 hectares of agricultural land has now been cultivated. This is another mountaintop removal mine. This was in partnership with Appalachian Voices. And I'm just going to toggle back and forth here. This is the imagery loaded up into Maps Engine. And you can see the growth of the mine just versus the base map data that's there. And it's unfortunate to say the base map data that's there is not all that old. This is a really interesting story. This is actually a landslide in Tibet. Unfortunately, the base map image is a little bit difficult to look at, but where things get really interesting and devastating is when we look at the effect of the landslide, where over 80 miners died, and it's been a really, really highly contested issue, because the official report by the Chinese government is that the landslide had nothing to do with the mining, and we can actually see with the imagery that not only is the result directly related to the mining, but the mining activity is actually increasing and spreading into other areas. So tragedies like this are only likely to increase in frequency in this region. So back to the Skybox for Good beta. So we're looking at a 9 to 12 month program where we're looking to find 5 really significant projects. As I mentioned, the goal for Skybox is to move from sort of one-off mapping, we just need a new picture, and into this ongoing persistent monitoring. How can we change our understanding of activity in different areas around the world when we start monitoring them on a more frequent basis? And we're really looking to apply that same model to our work here. So where are projects that we can find ongoing need to monitor, understand activity, understand change? Obviously, in addition, we'll continue our work to support crisis response activities, and we'll still find ways of gathering limited amounts of imagery when we do just need that one-off update to what we already have. We'll be using the beta for a couple things. One, to really demonstrate the value and impact of this program moving forward so that we can continue to support it and scale it. We really want to learn with all of you. You'll see here that some of the information we're going to provide, not just today, but in the coming weeks around guidance for how to propose the program. We're really looking to you guys to help us understand how to design the program so that we can scale it. So as far as selection criteria and things like that, we're going to be a little bit more amorphous in these early phases as we work together to understand what really is going to demonstrate a successful project. And continue to innovate the model of how a for-profit company and organizations such as yours can truly partner together. So a couple things we will be looking at for what will make a successful project. How are you going to measure the impact of your project? It's really, really important to us that as we're providing access to this imagery and using up this capacity on the satellite, that we're demonstrating the impact of the data that we're collecting and the work that we're doing together. As I mentioned, showcasing the kind of monitoring and analytics applications that are uniquely enabled by the Skybox constellation that we can continue to develop going forward as we add more satellites and increase that capability. And also, what is the plan for publishing and communicating our results together? So wanted to provide you with just a couple of next steps. So next week, we're going to reach out and provide some more details on exactly what we're looking for in proposals and how much capacity, for example, you might be able to really utilize and what the process will look like. We're hoping to get proposals in by the end of November for the actual projects, and we'd like to have them selected by the end of the year so that we can begin collecting early next year and get these things going together. And we are here at Google, but I'm going to borrow a Jobsian phrase here, there's actually one more thing I want to talk about as part of this project. So we are releasing all of the data we collect under this program under a Creative Commons attribution license. This is the most permissive license we've ever used for broad release of imagery outside of specific crisis response activities. And this means we're giving a lot of freedom to not just you here, but really to everybody. You can share the data, you can adapt the data, as long as you attribute that data to us. You can do what you will with it, including commercial activities. You'll notice there's one thing that is missing from this that you often see in open licenses, and that's a share-alike provision. So you are under no restrictions in using this to re-release anything you do in that same model. Now, that's not because we're not hoping you do share alike. It's because by working with the community, we've heard that there are often times where organizations have been unable to use open data that does have that share-alike provision and commingle it with existing data that they have due to the viral nature of that license. And here at Google, we like experiments, and this really is an experiment. Together as a community, if we can demonstrate that without the explicit requirement to share data and create a truly open data collective, if we can demonstrate that doing that without being forced to, it still happens, then I believe this is something that we can continue to scale and continue to do much beyond just this initial phase. But as I mentioned, that really requires the participation of everybody here. And as I said, I recognize that there are certainly times where there are going to be works that you're doing where the data you develop certainly cannot be shared openly, and we understand that, and we certainly want to protect that. But when you can, we hope and encourage that you choose to share your data in this exact same way, so that other organizations who may not have that ability to re-release their derived data can continue to benefit from all the work that you do. So thank you very much. We're really, really excited to be here. We're delighted to be able to get this program launched. And with that, I think we have a little bit of time for questions.
How much, what will be the periodicity of the images that you plan to have when you have the whole constellation up in orbit?
Depending by latitude, but basically what we're looking at as we get to a year from now with 8 satellites up, we should be able to see anywhere about daily. With the next block of satellites, we should get to about twice a day. That doesn't necessarily mean we'll be able to actually provide monitoring at that frequency. That's really the absolute limit of what we can do. So for example, with 2 satellites, what we're starting to move towards is picking locations that we're going to monitor on a weekly basis. And I think what we feel that weekly is a first big jump from what you can get from the providers of today, where, as I said before, maybe if you're lucky, you can get monthly, more likely quarterly imagery, and it's traditionally really expensive to do so. And as the constellation builds, hopefully we'll start getting to twice a week, and maybe in the later part of Block 2, get towards daily.
What drove your choice for 9:30 and 10 as opposed to local noon?
So 2 things. One, most visible Earth observation satellites don't image at directly noon, largely due to you need a little bit of shadow in order to see vertical relief. And so there's not a lot done at noon. The first 2 satellites actually launched in a way that's called secondary launch. So we bought up excess capacity on existing rockets that had large primary satellites on them. So we were going where the rocket was already going. So we down-selected to orbits that were going to work for us, but we only had certain options available. As we move to the block launches, we're actually going to be buying our own rockets and launching 6+ satellites at a time. And when we do that, we will have more direct control over where they go. Excuse me, we're actually looking towards some afternoon orbits, so more like 1:30, 3 o'clock, to complement the 9:30 and 10:30 orbits that most visible imaging satellites are at today.
You mentioned that Skybox for good data is open. I'm just wondering what's the where's the line between for good data and not for good data, or standard data, I guess you would call it.
Yeah. We certainly hope all of our data doesn't fall into the not for good category. No, so specifically, this data is data that we release under this program. So projects that are part of the beta, data that we've collected under the alpha, and those additional crisis response data collections.
We've already made available a map with the data that we've collected already with download links to the GeoTIFFs. So you can go and get them today. You can get the GME and Earth Engine IDs to pull them into your projects. We will have that map and probably some other resources that list all of the data released under this program, so you can find it there. The stuff that we publish straight into Earth and Maps from Skybox obviously won't be listed there and won't be available for download.
Actually, a comment and a question. I think a lot of us have struggled for over 10 years in making more accessible satellite data, especially for disaster management, and there's a lot of stories to that. But I see now an opportunity here to have a strategy, maybe also with what you are doing in terms of changing that or changing the game. And we have mechanisms, we have international charter, all this very heavy, very bureaucratic in a way. And maybe you have an opportunity now, maybe going beyond the beta somehow to reduce the scale of that inefficiency the same way as you have the scale of the satellites you showed in the beginning between Worldview 2 and your SkySat. So that's the comment. I think it's worth thinking about that longer term, because there's an opportunity here as I see it, and I've been doing this for a long time. And the question is, do you look at sensor planning service, this OGC standard, for example, in terms of direct tasking of the satellites, especially when you come to having 20-something up there, it might be very useful for tasking purposes. Thanks.
First, to sort of respond to the comment, that's exactly what we're hoping to do. We're definitely, we would view it as not a huge win if we just released a bunch of data like this and nothing ultimately changed. Okay, never mind. We hope that by doing this, other remote sensing operators, anybody who's working with data in the community recognizes that this is a new model for releasing data, for open collaboration, and that the benefits of providing data in that way far outweigh the perceived loss of control. Because that's the way most satellite operators to date really view their data as that is their prize, and they hold it really, really close and provide very limited access to it. So we're hoping that this can just be a little action that trickles into a much broader change. With regard to open standards, we've looked at many of them. It's been a while since I looked at the sensor planning service in particular. One thing I'll comment on broadly around standards in the remote sensing industry is, to date, a lot of the standards have been developed by governments. And we have unfortunately not seen a lot of collaboration in the remote sensing and geospatial space in sort of the private and nonprofit sector in standards development in the way you have in internet standards, for example. And in general, when governments develop standards, they are really, really verbose, to put it nicely. And so I think that's an area for improvement across the industry is better private nonprofit coalitions developing standards and not leaving it to the governments to tell us how to collaborate. I think we'll see a lot more successful standards development and much better adoption if we pursue that kind of work.
Hi, I was wondering about the spectral specifications for monitoring vegetation. You had one crop health slide there, and I was wondering how long you anticipate the beta phase lasting.
Yeah, so the beta phase is going to be about 9 to 12 months. That's sort of the period we're currently looking at, although again, we're very much looking at sort of your project proposals as helping us better understand what the project should look like. So we get a bunch of proposals in and we realize that we need to modify that a little bit. We'll certainly take that as a bit of feedback and see what we can do. With regard to the spectral question, basically it's 4-band imagery, so red, green, blue, near infrared. I don't have the specific band specs off the top of my head right now. But yeah, so we're using the near infrared channel for our vegetation analysis.
To follow up on the length of the beta program, we wish we could open it up faster and bigger to more people right now, but we only have 2 small satellites up right now, and the pipeline for processing all that imagery still involves a lot of manual work. So it's, we're transitioning all of Skybox's systems over to Google infrastructure now, and there's just a lot of stuff that is still in the works, so we're just not ready for a high volume data production. So
Christian and I spent a lot of time running scripts on laptops in the last couple of weeks to get those mosaics published.
If you find errors in the georeferencing of the images, I will not be surprised. If they are egregious, let us know and we will try to redo it. So as those processes get automated and get faster, we will be able to provide more imagery, and we'll hopefully be able to scale this up significantly by the end of this program.
Yeah.
So much of what's in Earth Engine right now is Landsat, and that's a wonderful 30-year record. It's not clear to me beyond the Geo for Good. Is it going to be for fee, or how open do you plan this to be?
You're saying beyond just the Skybox for Good data?
Yes, I mean, could it end up being a standard augmentation that we can use? Or?
So that work is really ongoing at this point. Where the integration is sort of just at the point now where we're figuring out what the business model is going to be going forward. So unfortunately, I don't really know. I think, we are now part of Google, and so I think that means whereas as Skybox, the vast majority of our data, almost all of it, was going to be for fee. Google does have a bias towards making data more open, so hopefully we will be making strides in that direction, but I can't at this point specifically say what we're going to do in that regard.
Satellites still aren't free, even the little ones. So there will be most likely some business model there. We will do our best from the Geo for Good team and the Earth Outreach team to make that as accessible as possible, especially to folks like you. But that's still very much in the works, like Julian said.